What is this idiocy of the recycling cult? Yes, recycling, repurposing. This is all part of a religious cult, and I call them the recycle heads. Did you know that over 80% of America's and Europe's waste goes unrecycled? That's a fact. Recycling has become a religion, a cult, an obsession, especially with people of the West. We're told to save the forest, protect the wetlands, honor the Earth Goddess Gaia, and all other sort of insane rhetoric is pushed into our heads by the media and the leftist and the woke and the gullible. Wait, they're all the same thing. Understand this, we should be responsible stewards of this earth, but not fanatic cultists driven by insane fanaticism and fantasy and over-the-top philosophies. Look at trees, the ultimate in sustainability. Yeah, I can put up with a word from sustainable sources when it makes common sense. Recycling paper does save trees. But if you just look around you, you're going to find out that we've got a lot more trees than we need. According to the Department of Land Management, there are more trees of harvestable size growing in the USA today than there were 300 years ago. Look, George, there's a tree. Oh my God, they're everywhere, and they are. Our insane, headlong charge to save the trees has brought us a whole new problem: overforestation. In English, that's too many trees. Perennially, we experience forest fires, floods, a host of other mini disasters that can all be directly attributed to overforestation in America. The greatest sustainable resource we have is our trees, and we're not using them anywhere near their potential. Yes, the timber industry, for example, has found it profitable to plant 2 or 3 trees for every one they harvest. That makes sense. And they rotate timberlands, so by the time they get back to the first timberland, it's 20, 30 years later, and guess what? Them baby trees has become tall, harvestable lumber. Only government regulation, often based on the Gaia mythology, has limited logging in our country and, in some states, banned it altogether. Unable to harvest the valuable timber resources due to overregulation and laws based on false premise, overforestation and its many hazards are here. They're here, baby, right now. If they were chickens, they would have come home to roost. Now, you know, another blow to reality is that federal and state governments often provide huge financial and tax incentives to firms for recycling paper and wood products. Without government bailouts of this type, the cost of recycled wood and paper products would be nearly 71% more expensive than those produced from raw or virgin forest. This is according to the Hemer Institute for Ecological Common Sense in a report dated August 2013. You know, you got to stop and think about it a minute. You always hear them say, we can recycle these bags and make a new bag and do it for 20% less. Yeah, that 20% savings they're touting is because they're being fueled and fed with tax cuts, tax breaks, cash incentives. I mean, we're talking, here's a bunch of money, go recycle some paper. When I go to the grocery store, I ask for paper bags because, unlike their plastic counterparts, they're recyclable, biodegradable, and they come from a sustainable source. Right, trees. Sustainable, chop it down, grow a new one. Chop it down, it keeps coming back. It just makes sense to use paper, cardboard, and wood products as earth-friendly alternatives. Okay, we said enough about wood, we said enough about trees. How about aluminum cans and metal recycling? Now there's a trip for you. You know, advances in recycling technology have made metal recycling less expensive, not cheap enough, and more efficient, not efficient enough, almost to the point of being a source for a viable industry. Recycled aluminum, like beer cans, that can be produced right now at about the same cost as producing it from raw ore. But, okay, here's what they tell you. We recycle iron, steel, ferrous, and non-ferrous metals, and we're doing it 29% cheaper than it is to take it by digging it out of the ground. But that's a lie! In fact, studies now show that if the metals recycling industry had to stand on its own 2 feet, it would fall over. It would collapse under the weight of expense, equipment, energy, labor. What we're experiencing is yet another recycling industry being juiced by the leftist, save the whales, and hug a tree media, and a communist government. It's an ugly truth that many so-called recyclables collected and sent to recycling plants are never really recycled. They don't want you to know that up around about 80% of what you throw away never gets recycled. This is either due to cost or technological limitations. It is estimated that in many cases, with 80% of your recyclables going to the landfills. Yes, the plastic, the glass, many metals are not economically recyclable even with federal handouts, so they go to the landfill. Beep, beep, beep. Dump the trash. And you know, the worst of these is plastic. Even Greenpeace now says plastic recycling is a dead-end street. Almost all plastics are hauled off to landfills, not even disguised as being going to recycling plants. Of the few plastic recycling plants in America, the costs are proving prohibitive, the process is unreliable, and the headaches of maintenance on very expensive machinery is making it prohibitive. Again, were it not for government bailouts, these plants would be nothing more than rusting hulks, remnants of a futile and failed effort. Writer John Tierney says, quote here, "Recycling is an industry that uses increasingly expensive labor to produce materials that are worth less and less," end quote. Wouldn't it be smarter just to take it to the landfills? Let's talk about landfills. All right, we talked about trees, talked about metal recycling, plastic not recyclable. We have walked into landfills. Now, many people have already drunk the Kool-Aid, thinking that landfills are terrible polluters. Oh my God, they're horrible. Just a simple dip into fact shows that they are not. State and federal regulations ensure that today's landfills have giant protective barriers so they won't leak into surrounding groundwater or soil. When landfills reach maturity, that means they're full, no more crap goes here. They often are converted into ski runs, public parks, golf courses, wildlife habitat, and even subdivisions for new housing. The next cup of Kool-Aid has convinced many that we're running out of space for these landfills. My God, they're everywhere. The woke tree huggers of Washington and the major media would have you believe this, but you know what? Ready, ding, ding, ding. It's a lie. It's a big lie. America has far more space for landfills than it will ever need. With an overabundance of open land suitable for reclamation by landfill, America has more space than they can ever fill. Sometimes states and businesses actually bid and fight over the right to get somebody's garbage. Says writer Tierney again, he says, I quote, "If you think of the United States as a football field, all the garbage that we will generate in the next 1,000 years would fit inside a fraction of the 1-inch line." End quote. Isn't it time we put propaganda to bed and took a look at science instead? Isn't it time we sacrificed the fictional goddess Gaia on the altar of truth? Isn't it time to challenge municipal orders requiring multiple trash cans, forcing us to pre-sort our trash or be fined, when it's going to be picked up by robo-truck and it's going to go to the same landfill, it's going to be dumped in the same plot, it's going to be plowed into the same dirt, it's going to become the same playground? Come on, 3 and 4 different colored cans, what a bunch of crap. If you ask me, that's yet another exercise in control. So let's sum this up, baby. The recycling cult is going to have to face the reality because the chickens, as I said, have come home to roost. I'm Max, and that's the way I see it.